Hello and welcome back to Footballers. It's the January transfer window, which means we're going to be bombarded with tons and tons of transfer rumors. I do plan on making videos covering those rumors soon, but for now I thought it'd be fun to take a trip down memory lane and go through the best and the worst January transfers in history. We're going to be doing a top 5 of each, cycling through one by one. Let's waste no time in getting into number 5, starting with the best category. We have Bruno Fernandes to Manchester United from Sporting Lisbon. This transfer took place on deadline day of 2020. Manchester United have been absolutely terrible for over a decade now since Sir Alex Ferguson left. But one of the few, and I mean few, bright spots of United since that time has been the signing of Bruno Fernandes. He's pretty much carried them on his back. Now this transfer was 65 million euros, which is a pretty high fee, but it's going to look incredibly low when you see some of the prices of the worst transfers coming later on this list. Bruno Fernandes was well worth the money for United. If we take a look at his Premier League stats here, you can see he made 178 appearances. He scored 58 goals, 47 assists, 4 times Player of the Month, all in 2020. Definitely one of the best January transfers of all time. Now let's get into the worst for number 5. We have Mykhailo Mudryk to Chelsea. Yes, sorry Chelsea fans, but your club is gonna appear multiple times on this list. This transfer took place on Sunday the 15th of January 2023, halfway through their abysmal 2022-23 season. Sky Sports has the fee reported at a whopping £88.5 million, which is just insane, and Transfer Market has it as just the 70 million euros. Now remember, Man United got Bruno Fernandes for less than this. Let's look at Mudryk's stats compared to Bruno Fernandes. He's made 53 appearances, scored just 5 goals and 4 assists. All 5 of Mykhailo Mudryk's goals came in the 2023-24 season, where his form had started to rise and it looked like he could almost be worth maybe half of what Chelsea paid for him. But I'm sure most of you will remember his terrible debut half of the season when he was just getting constantly berated to death. He did pull himself out a little bit, but since Maresca joined, he hasn't really done a whole lot. Much less has he been worth the 70 million euros that Chelsea paid for him. And for that reason, he's definitely deserving of his spot as number 5 on the worst January transfers of all time. Alright, now we're on to number 4, starting with the best transfers. We have Marcelo joining Real Madrid. Yes, this transfer is so old that I had to pull it from this incredible looking website. According to Transfer Market, this transfer was completed on January the 1st, 2007, right at the beginning of the window. But somehow this Real Madrid fan knew about it on Tuesday, November 14th, 2006. So clearly some kind of psychic making this blog post, or Florentino Perez himself, possibly. It may surprise you all to know that Real Madrid kidnapping young Brazilian teenagers isn't a new phenomenon. It's been going on for a long time. It's important to remember that Real Madrid had Roberto Carlos at this time. Marcelo was fully expected to be his replacement. Although it took Marcelo a little while to kick on, he more than certainly became a Real Madrid legend. He won 5 Champions Leagues, 4 Club World Cups, 3 UEFA Super Cups, 6 La Liga titles, 2 Kings Cups, which is the Copa del Rey, a strange translation, 5 Spanish Super Cups, and then, some Olympic stuff. He is Real Madrid's most decorated player in history, which for the most successful club in history is an insane achievement. Honestly, he could be higher on this list, but it wasn't such a dramatic transfer since, it was a young left back going relatively under the radar. Now we come to number 4 of the worst January transfers in history, and we have none other than Fernando Torres from Liverpool to Chelsea on deadline day in 2011. This is one of the most iconic transfers of all time, and if you were around watching football at this time, you'll remember how incredibly widely it was discussed. Torres became pretty much the biggest meme in football because of this transfer. Nowadays, looking at £50 million, that's just kind of your run-of-the-mill, everyday transfer that a top team is going to make. However, back then, as you can see, he was the most expensive player in history of British football. So keep that in mind when we look at these stats. So Fernando Torres scored 20 goals and 16 assists in 110 appearances in the Premier League. That's not bad at all, especially when we compare it to what Mudryk's stats look like. He's a solid player, definitely. But at the time, he was pretty much the best striker in the league, maybe besides, Wayne Rooney or Tevez, but he was right up there with them. He made a decent step up to Chelsea, and he was expected to really kick on in the prime of his career, but he faltered, he failed. He kept missing easy chances. For comparison, I know 20 goals, 16 assists looks pretty good. That's 36 goal contributions in 110 games. But look at what he was doing for Liverpool. 77 goal contributions. That's more than double in less games, 102 games. He was absolutely on fire. He was also a big star for Spain and their Euros win and their World Cup win. I know he was competing with David Villa, but he still was a big part of that team. So that's why, even though he had some decent stats, he's still considered a flop. Now, some Chelsea fans won't agree with me about calling Torres a flop, because some say that this moment alone made his transfer fee completely worth it, but you've got to take into account how big the fee was, what was expected of him, and what he actually did. I'm not putting him in the top 3 worst January transfers of all time, but he definitely deserves to be on this list. That's why he sits at number 4. Alright, now we're on to number 3. Starting with our best January transfers, we have the legendary Serbian defender Nemanja Vidic joining Manchester United from Spartak Moscow on January 6, 2006. He cost £7 million, which at the time was a pretty decent fee. It'd be like paying, around 30 to 40 million nowadays, but still an incredible price for someone who you could argue was the best defender in Premier League history. Personally, I wouldn't argue that, but I'd say he's at least in the top 10. This is another website that shows the age of this transfer and just how old it was. I love how you can just count the pixels on this lovely image of Vidic. It's interesting because he wasn't some, huge, crazy wonder kid signing. He was still 24. But man, what he went on to be was just absolutely incredible. When he joined up with Rio Ferdinand, they formed the best defensive partnership of all time. Just bar none. Just an incredible, incredible center back duo. If we look at his stats here in the Premier League, he made 211 appearances. He got 95 clean sheets, and he was the player of the season twice, in 2008-09 and 2010-11. That makes him the only defender to win the Premier League Player of the Season award twice, and only 1 out of 4 defenders to ever win the award. One of the Premier League greats for an amazing transfer fee, definitely deserves the spot at number 3 on the best January transfers of all time. Alright, now we're on to number 3 of the worst January transfers of all time, and we have Andy Carroll signing for Liverpool from Newcastle on transfer deadline day of January 2011. Yes, this is part 2 in the Fernando Torres to Chelsea saga, and Andy Carroll was supposed to be Liverpool's replacement for Torres. Paying £35 million, or according to Transfer Market, 41 million euros for a player who was worth €2.5 million is the absolute definition of a panic buy. Andy Carroll was very impressive with Newcastle, scoring 11 goals in that half season before his move to Liverpool. But since that move, he managed to score 6 goals and 2 assists in 44 appearances for the Reds. Pretty abysmal for a £35 million signing, which back then would be like paying $100 million now. It was an insane fee. Now, in a unique turn of events, we're going to move on to number 2 of the best January transfers of all time. By taking a look at part 3 in this Torres and Andy Carroll saga, we can just click to the side here on BBC's website. On the same day, transfer deadline day of January 2011, Liverpool signed Luis Suarez from Ajax for £22.7 million. Yes, for far less than Andy Carroll and for far less than Fernando Torres, Liverpool picked up one of the best strikers of all time. In his 110 Liverpool appearances, he scored 69 goals and 22 assists, including that absolutely incredible 2013-14 season where he scored 3 hat-tricks, 31 goals, and 11 assists in just 33 appearances, and he just completely carried Liverpool on his back. In my opinion, this is the single greatest season by a player in Premier League history. He won the Player of the Season, of course, and he also won the Golden Boot, breaking the record at the time. Of course, Ronaldo also had 31 goals, but he did it in the fewest of games. He did hold that record until Mohamed Salah would break it a few years later. But yeah, 22 million for Luis Suarez is an absolutely unbelievable deal, and it kind of means that Andy Carroll's horrible deal didn't really matter for Liverpool. So Suarez definitely deserves his place at number 2 on the all-time best January transfers list. Now at number 2 on our worst January transfers of all time, we have the swap deal to end all swap deals, the worst swap deal of all time. On the 22nd of January 2018, Alexis Sanchez joining Man United and Henrik Mkhitaryan joining Arsenal. Now, I think you can pretty safely say that Man United got the worst end of this deal. Sanchez for them was pretty horrendous. He did basically nothing. 5 goals and 9 assists in 45 appearances for a player that put up these kind of numbers, 80 goals and 44 assists for Arsenal, being one of the best players in the league for them. He absolutely flopped at Man United. So Arsenal, you'd be thinking, well, they definitely got the better of the deal. I mean, very slightly. They got Mkhitaryan. Well, he did do better than Sanchez. 9 goals and 12 assists in 59 appearances. He played worse than he did with Man United. He was considered a flop at Man United. With 13 goals and 10 assists, he did worse for Arsenal. For a player that, look at his numbers for Dortmund. Very good numbers for Dortmund. Solid in the Italian league as well. At the time, this actually seemed like a great deal. Look at what the pundits said. Alan Shearer said, I think it's a good business for both clubs. Dwight York said, having a player of that quality added to our squad with the great ability we've already got up front. Let's take a look. What was the great ability they had in January 2018? Let's see. What was the great... Okay, they had Lukaku. They had Martial. They had Jesse Lingard. Wow. With the combination of Alexis Sanchez, Jesse Lingard, and Anthony Martial, it's unbelievable that they didn't win the league. Danny Higginbotham said he's that match winner. I'm not comparing him to Eric Cantona, but he's one of them that can possibly turn a drab 0-0 into a 1-0. In the end, it really just didn't work out for either parties, and to me, the deal is just sweeter that it's 2 players going to 2 different teams. It's a swap deal, but neither of them worked out at all. It's a pretty legendary transfer and deserving of the number 2 spot on our worst January transfers list. Alright, now we come to number 1, the best of the best versus the worst of the worst. Starting with the best. We have Virgil van Dijk joining Liverpool from Southampton for 75 million euros on January 1st, 2018. You wouldn't exactly say that this was a bargain because it did break the record fee for a defender at the time. Here's something that'll persuade you as to just how great this transfer was. So I know that these transfers were technically a year apart, but this just puts it into a hilarious perspective. So Liverpool paid 84.6 million euros for Virgil van Dijk, who went on to be one of the best center backs in the world, one of the greatest that the Premier League has ever seen. And Man United, at a similar time when they were struggling, needing to find a defender, if they had just a year earlier splashed the cash on Van Dijk, instead they spent more money than Liverpool paid for Van Dijk, 87 million euros on Harry Maguire. Now, with that knowledge, this is a complete, total bargain. One of the best deals, and in my opinion, the best January transfer of all time. Why would I put it above Suarez? There's more money. Suarez is a better player than Van Dijk. I would agree that Suarez is a better player than Van Dijk, but was he better for Liverpool than Van Dijk was for Liverpool? No. Virgil van Dijk has now played almost 300 games for Liverpool. You just can't understate how important he was to that team. Before Liverpool signed Van Dijk, they were just missing something. They were missing that edge. They needed that leader to guide them to victory, and since they signed Van Dijk, they won just about every trophy they could. They won the Champions League in 2019, they won the Club World Cup in 2020, they won the FA Cup in 2022, they won the League Cup in 2022-2024, they won the Super Cup in 2023, and most importantly, they won their first Premier League in 30 years in 2020. I'm not going to say that Van Dijk is the only one responsible for this. Obviously, Klopp put together an absolutely unbelievable team, but without him, I will confidently say that this would not have been possible. In terms of his Premier League impact, he is very much arguably the best defender in Premier League history. I would personally put him above Vidic. People have their opinions. I'd put him above Vidic, Ferdinand. You could argue that John Terry Company, they're all up there, but Van Dijk is probably the best. He won the Premier League Player of the Season in 2018-19. He very, very narrowly lost the Ballon d'Or to Lionel Messi, who also had an absolutely incredible year that year. An absolute legend of the game and a deserving fit for number one of the greatest January transfer of all time. So Liverpool, with some of the worst business with Andy Carroll, redeemed themselves with Suarez and Van Dijk, but we're not done with them yet. The number one worst transfer of all time also involves Liverpool, but it's who they let go. This transfer that took place on January 6, 2018 is some of the worst pieces of business done, not by Liverpool. The money that they got was very well invested, but by Barcelona, who wasted £142 million on Philippe Coutinho, who would go on to only score 25 goals and get 14 assists for them. Those aren't terrible numbers, but they're not worth £142 million. That's just absolutely insane. He's one of the most expensive players in history. There's really not much else to be said. He looked like an absolute world beater. He was pretty much carrying Liverpool in the early Jurgen Klopp years, and it looked like a bad piece of business to let him go. But it ended up being an absolutely genius move, and it worked out incredibly for Jurgen Klopp. Just by the sheer number of the transfer fee alone, I think you have to put this at number one for the worst January transfer of all time. Well, that wraps up our video today. If you enjoyed, please leave a like. It does help out. Please let me know in the comments below what you think about these transfers. Would you switch the list around? Was there anyone I forgot? Please let me know. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video and subscribe to Footballers for more videos like this one.